I think Austrian economics, if it's done well and if it's done in the right way, is the best approach to understand Bitcoin. And obviously, I think Satoshi Nakamoto was inspired by that tradition. But you can be an Austrian economist and not get Bitcoin. So there's no guarantee. So you really have to do it well, and you have to get the lesson of humility in order to be open enough to understand something so new and so complex like Bitcoin.
So you're an Austrian economist. That's what it says. What does an Austrian economist do?
Well, I'm an Austrian economist in both senses. So I'm Austrian and I'm a follower of the tradition of Austrian economics that was started by Karl Menger. And it's quite different from the tradition that has dominated economics and the social sciences. So it's a specific tradition of understanding complex social phenomena.
Yeah. And could you tell us what like the core ideas are of Austrian economics?
First is realism. It's like we really care about reality, not so much about how things should be, but how they actually are. So it's a bit of a humble approach to the world, and it's not based on big ideas and big words, but actually on real humans and real humans acting. And another aspect is subjectivism, is that we know that human beings are free to have their own preferences and act upon those preferences. And it's the best way to understand it is with empathy. It's understanding that people can be different and have different preferences. And it's these differences that bring people together, because as we value things differently, we can have an exchange. If we were all the same, we wouldn't exchange anything. And it's exchange that fosters society and cooperation. And that's some of the crucial insights of the Austrian school. So I'd say it's a very interdisciplinary, very down-to-earth, very realistic approach to human beings and to society.
Is that kind of the bridge to a free market, that you don't supervise, but you let things happen and you let people in their individuality?
It's no ideological concept. It's just, I think, common sense. As you would approach other adult beings, you don't try to change them. You don't believe that you know everything better than other people around you. So first, you should assume that the person you're talking to also has his experiences and his knowledge, and it's very specific knowledge. And the best approach to other people is seeking for win-win cooperation. It's not trying to change you. It's trying to see where we find common value. So I can achieve my ends better and you can achieve your ends better. And so we meet on the means and we don't have to agree on all the ends and everything. I think it's a very commonsensical approach, and there's nothing to do with constructing a kind of utopia, how we would live. So just down-to-earth approach. And the market usually means that we interact with lots of people that are foreign to us. Of course, that's modernity, that we interact indirectly with billions of people and directly with thousands and 10,000, maybe 100,000 of people that we don't know, and we don't have to agree on everything. And that brings wealth. That's the main base of 99% of all the material wealth comes from this kind of global collaboration that's piecemeal and that integrates lots and lots of people with very different skills and insights. That's a market that you could call a market.
Yeah. So how do you create such an environment where in a world where rules are so important or put so much emphasis on, where are Austrian economics applied in the current world?
You don't create systems. That's not the belief of the Austrian school. It's most important application.
But you have to create some sort of framework to keep the system out of the environment, right?
I wouldn't focus on that. Usually it doesn't work. Usually it's better to, I mean, if you have to conceal, as privacy is important, technology is important, mobility is important, But most importantly, it's value creation, which is not evident, figuring out what problems you can solve for real people under real circumstances. So the market is more a process, it's not some structure that you create. And of course, you can learn from history and you can learn from the insights of the Austrian school and think about better rules. And usually the rules are better that are not interventionist regulations. It's where you assume that even the judge can't know everything. So you need to have a fair process of dealing with uncertainty. And usually you arrive there not from top down construction or creation, but from discovery. So better rules are discovered by people. That was already the founder of the school, Karl Menger, who figured that out. You can't convince people usually, they have to discover it. And all the good rules that we use in language, that we use in money is a certain framework of rules and processes, we discover them to be more useful for us, making more sense. And that I think is the best approach. Don't worry too much about those. There will always be other people going for win-lose extraction and trying to harm you. But I think it's better to focus on the positive part that you can shape, that you have a say about. So choose your environment. Choose the kind of cooperations and interactions and try to cut out this kind of negative, toxic, win-lose relationships wherever you can. But don't worry too much about the geopolitical big sphere because chances are high you won't change that.
And that's going to work. Okay, yeah. What would you say are the main difference between Austrian economics and Keynesianism?
Humility.
Humility.
Is most of the Keynesians are like Keynes was a very intelligent person. And intelligent persons tend to overestimate the importance of reason and intelligence and expertise. And the Keynesians are even worse than Keynes. They tend to be social engineers, people who think they figured it out, they can create now better systems, they can improve upon human interaction, they can fix errors. And the better approach is to assume that you don't know more than anyone else, and you shouldn't. No one should have the power to construct entire systems, and this most likely will turn out to be totalitarian. So it's better to understand than to judge. It's better to learn than to teach. And it's better to cooperate and find real ways for cooperation than worrying too much about what may go wrong. And if everything is already perfectly in place for you to be able to cooperate and create value.
Interesting. And how did you get to know Bitcoin and what's your take on it?
I was unfortunately too early in Bitcoin, so I learned.
You were too early.
Too early because, of course, much easier now to go into Bitcoin because there's 15 years that we've learned a lot. And Bitcoin is a very complex phenomenon and it's an endless learning process. So how did I think it's a gradual process. I had to encounter it many, many times in different contexts and learn something new every time about it in order to get Bitcoin. So it's a very gradual process.
And it aligns well with Austrian economics. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think Austrian economics, if it's done well and if it's done in the right way, is the best approach to understand Bitcoin. And obviously, I think Satoshi Nakamoto was inspired by that tradition. But you can be an Austrian economist and not get Bitcoin. So there's no guarantee. So you really have to do it well. And you have to get the lesson of humility in order to be open enough to understand something so new and so complex like Bitcoin.
Great. And you've heard of AI, of course. What do you think? Can you imagine that through AI we could end up in a world where the concept of free market economy doesn't make so much sense anymore, where the role of money isn't so important anymore. I remember Elon Musk saying once that in the future he's not sure if money plays such a big role anymore. Should AI completely turn everything upside down? What's your take on that?
I'm reminded by a very old discussion when Hayek was countered by a few technologists who thought that the innovations in digitalization and computers would allow us to not have a market anymore, because if you have a centralized computer, you could compute the economy, right? You just feed it data. And it was actually applied. In Chile, socialism tried the most advanced version. They had a kind of command room and control room with lots of screens and telefax machines at the time, sending in all the data, and they computed it. And if you look at it, it's of course ridiculous. It's entirely ridiculous to assume, because the wrong conception is that the economy is about things that are already known. So you can gather data, and that's of course what AI and the large language models do, is just they extrapolate on existing data. So they get correlations and very complex vectors of correlations. What's really important about the economy is the things that are not known yet and are unknowable. That's the uncertain, and they're AI or large language models don't change much. They will help us to probably innovate better, invent more, find new patterns. But still, much more important than this invention part is innovation, is figuring out how it actually fixes human problems. And human beings change. When some problems will be addressed more easily via technology than before, and so we have more space for new problems to come up, new preferences to emerge. That's the whole history of technological progress. I hope it speeds up. I'm an accelerationist. I hope it's fast. I'm a bit impatient. I would like to see more positive impact by the large language models. There's not that much usefulness yet. They are mostly useful in producing bullshit text, which I'm very happy about, because sometimes you have to produce bullshit to fill out forms and for all the bullshit jobs that needs all this kind of bullshit input to create bullshit output. So there's already some productivity gains. But mostly it will take quite a while for the real productivity to go up, because people are resistant to change. They have to rationalize what they are doing. They are stuck in processes. They take a hard... It takes a long time to learn new things. I mean, Bitcoin is 15 years old and it's based on technology that's decades old, and still it feels very new. And for most people, it's not even new yet. It's like an undiscovered thing. So it shows you why I'm impatient. It always takes longer than you assume.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, people were usually scared when new technology came up. With the internet, we had that with electricity. But now with AI, you have, of course, potentially all these advantages, absolutely. But now you have like the experts being a bit wary and saying that it could get out of control, and that it could kind of even diminish our role on this planet. And I think that could turn things upside down.
I mean, technology can profoundly change society in unimaginable ways. There's big danger in technology, but it doesn't matter. What are you going to do? Technology is never going to be stopped. It's never the right way to address new technology. So I would recommend to not listen too much to experts.
No.
And usually it's not a good heuristic. It's because the real crucial thing is the things that are not known yet. And an expert, someone who has recognized expertise, is really good at what has worked so far. So usually, and of course, people have an interest in exaggerating dangers and catastrophes if you are an expert on that kind of catastrophe. So I think the incentives are not great. So
several people. Sorry,
I'm more afraid from humans censoring AI because they are AI security experts. I think those are the dangerous people. Of course, large language models can have very profound changes, but what are you going to do? I mean, it may change society eventually to a large extent. There will be some positive, there will be some negative. It's best to adapt. It's best to use it in a positive way, and best not to try to regulate as you do in the EU, and try to prevent all harm. By trying to prevent all harm, you create much more harm because you decrease the capacity to adapt, the capacity to master new technology. So I think the really dangerous thing about AI is human beings being employed to keep it safe.
But you wouldn't put any regulations on it, because we do have that with like nuclear weapons, and it were especially like the security guys who left ChatGPT and left their shares in order to be able to speak out freely. So left a lot of money on the side to be able to warn the public about potential threats.
No, I'm not ideological. I mean, if you really had a clue about this technology, and I was a user, I'm a user of it, and if I get the impression, okay, you really know your stuff, and you tell me, I recommend to use that kind of regulation just to keep safe, I'd be very thankful and say, oh, that's great. You have a best practice for me, how I can use the technology in a safe way. And maybe we can work on industry standards because, of course, no one wants catastrophe who's a user. So we want to keep it safe. But usually it's bullshit. Usually it's people who have no clue. So they have to produce regulation. So they work in parliaments because they can't create technology. So that's just, I just call bullshit. So I'm not easily impressed by people who come up with ideas how we should regulate something and have no clue about it. First, you have to understand it, and then help me. Yes, help me use it in a safer way, and I'm all ears for that. Yeah, just cut out the typical European bullshits like we have to, and as if they have figured out everything. No, they don't know nothing. They're always late to the game. And it's always just a play to remain relevant. And that's just not the way to deal with technology.
Yeah. Great. Thanks so much for this insightful conversation. Thank you.